Hello everyone, how are you? Thanks so much for joining. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start off by just saying a little bit about who I am, and then we're going to jump into tonight's topic. So my name is Avrohom Leffler. I'm a therapist based in Lakewood, New Jersey. I specialize in things like anxiety, panic attacks, phobias, OCD, mood disorders, and yes, also parenting, and also trauma and marital. So that's just a little about me. Okay, so tonight's topic is all about parenting, and it's about, confident, empowered parenting. So, I just want to really just talk, just schmooze together, but so it should be semi-structured. I want to start off talking just in general a little about parenting, what I mean by confident, empowered parenting, like what does that mean? Then I want to move on just to some specific techniques that will actually help you to be a very confident parent, and then we're going to move on if there's any questions. So the ones that were sent in I'll do first, and any ones that are on the bottom I will definitely try to get to as many as I could as well. Okay. So parenting. So parenting is a very interesting thing because it's one of the most important topics in the world. Obviously raising our kids and dealing with our kids is super important. On the other hand, there's a lot of talk of, hey, parents aren't really trained. We just go in, we just do it, we just make it up. Are we good parents? Are we not? So all really, really good questions. So the fact of the matter is, yes, I think both are true. Most parents do a really good job. And it's important to realize that. And also we can work to become better parents as well. It can be a skill like anything else. All right. So let's talk a little about what it means to be a mindful, confident, and empowered parent. So parenting is made up of two things in my experience. Number one, it's made up of a parent's mentality. So in other words, you can have the best techniques in the world. Sometimes I'll have parents who come to me, teach me what to do, tell me this technique, that technique. You can have the best techniques, but what if it doesn't go according to script? And do you believe, are you confident that you can use it? And so on and so forth. What's your emotions like? So that also plays a really, really big role. So the first step, and this is always the first thing I encourage parents to use, is to pay attention to your own emotions, your own thoughts, your own confidence level with your parenting in general. All right, so that's super important. So what do I mean by that? So confidence as a parent means that, to know and to realize that you are a great parent. In other words, most parents that I work with, and I've worked with many, many dozens and dozens, do a really, really good job. No one's perfect. Parenting is complex. It's hard. So let's just validate that for a second. It's always one of the first things I do when I work with parents is to validate how hard it is. And especially sometimes I'm working with parents who have really hard kids. I always say, parenting is great. It's the best thing in the world. But it's also really, really hard and can be complex. And that's with the, regular kids, the hard kids, the really challenging kids. Really, really, really hard. So let's just validate for a second. And I will tell you, when I tell that to the parents that I work with, almost inevitably, they almost cry from relief just from hearing the validation that someone who is, yes, it's really, really hard. I also tell them that, a lot of the same stuff goes on in almost every single house, which is 100% true. Okay, so you're not alone. If you think that it's hard and your kids are the hardest, and there really are some really, really challenging kids out there, it's true. A lot of this stuff goes on in every single house, including mine, by the way, to some level at least. So yes, everyone goes through it. It is hard. No parent always has in control, and parents are angels. That's not how it goes in real life. That's more like a fairy tale in the movies. Or sometimes how we think what must go on, it's not the case. So let's just validate how hard it can be and how challenging it is, and that's a really good place to start. With all of that, most parents do a great job. In other words, they do the best they can. It's important to realize that, and every parent makes a mistake, and we learn as we go along. But overall, I think parents do a really, really good job. So that confidence level is important. And here's the thing. Even if you don't totally feel that confidence level, it is important to convey it. So in other words, to convey to your kids that as a parent, you are sort of in charge, and you are in charge of the house. If there's, some rules in the house, that you set them, that you enforce them. So that is important, and it's okay to fake it somewhat, but your kids look to you for that, and they expect it. And that's as well as far as any boundaries, in today's generation, it's true. We are, maybe we're closer to our kids, and it's more of like, sort of like friendly and all of that. 100%. I do think that's very, very important. And that we shouldn't be too rigid and get bent on rules and things have to be this way and have to be that way. And it's totally okay to be more friends and more friendly to a point. It is important to have some boundaries, and the boundaries are that, we are the parent and the kids are the kids, and it's two different entities. And I think it's important to realize that. And and I'll tell you a little secret. The kids expect that. Your kids sort of do expect there to be some rules in the house, and that you're the parent and that you're in charge. And when that's not done, in other words, if that's a boundary that does not take place, that's actually when they get like really confused, and they could even lose self-confidence. So they might not say that to you. They might not acknowledge that and say, hey, thanks so much for having rules, or for saying no, or for having these boundaries. Instead, they'll probably have a tantrum or something. But really, it's an unspoken thing which is taking place. So having confidence means that yes, we are the parents, we are in charge. We should have some rules. We should enforce them with all the buddy stuff and unconditional love and all those wonderful, wonderful things. It's still super important, to have the confidence that, yes, we are the parents and we're in charge. So that's just right off the bat. Number two, as far as, the mentality of a parent, what I'm referring to is mindfulness. So the first part of parenting is to be mindful, and all the techniques follow that. So what do I mean by being mindful? What does that mean to be a mindful parent? So let's define mindfulness just for 1 second. So mindfulness is basically choosing to be in the current moment on purpose, right? So that's a very wordy, very deliberate definition. It's true. But, that's what it is. It's being in the moment. Mindfulness, it's being curious. It's sort of choosing to say, hey, what's going on right now, and trying to do it in a calm, curious, and also non-judgmental way. All right? So how does that help? How does that help for parenting? So, where we get thrown off a lot is basically when we're not in the moment, when we're not calm, things don't go according to script, and there's chaos, and the kids come home from school, and of course supper or bedtime or morning routine, all those hard times, and they're not listening, and they're throwing things, or they're teasing their siblings, and it's really, really hard. So what do we do? What's going on inside of us? So if we're anxious, right, that's going to affect our parenting, right, and it's going to come across as such. That might mean that we feel hopeless, we feel like fleeing from the scene, probably for good reason. It is hard. Or, of course, as parents, sometimes we'll yell and scream, cut it out right now, and we're just losing control, or just wait until your mother, your father gets home, right? All this, again, I told you, the same things happen in every house. I'm sure everyone's nodding right now. So the fact of the matter is, if we could pay attention to those emotions, then we have a chance of remaining more calm and more in control, okay? And once we do that, we are going to be more effective, and whatever we're trying to do is likely to be more effective, and so on and so forth. And additionally, we're also modeling for our kids, how to be calm, and so on and so forth, which is really, really, really important. Another part of being mindful is we'll notice any thoughts that we're having. A lot of times the thoughts that we have affect how we feel. So very often, a parent might have thoughts like, I'm a terrible parent, or this is impossible, or I can't deal with this, or in my parents' house we didn't do this, or what's going to be with this kid. And the fact of the matter is, those are all really important thoughts, and maybe you'll choose to deal with it and maybe not. But it's just important to realize it, so that way you can reframe the thought. And if your thought is I'm a terrible parent, you're not, right? So you can say, actually the truth is I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing the best that I know how, and that will have to be good enough, and it usually is. So that's as far as the mindfulness. It also helps sometimes, like if like it's a really hard, scene for you, like morning routine is super hard. So before, let's say you go into your kid's bedroom, just to be mindful and to take a second and to pause, take a deep breath, literally for 10 seconds, for 30 seconds, and you might be able to be like, okay, I'm going in the room now, I know it's gonna be tough, but I can do this, and I'm gonna stay calm. Or especially if you have a plan in place, so much more likely that it's gonna go really, really well. Okay, so that's a little bit as far as being a mindful parent. Okay, so that's just as far as before anything else happens and any techniques and so on and so forth. I think that can be so helpful. All right, let's quickly move on to number 2, which is more what I'll call the technique, part of this. Okay, so a couple of just basic parenting tenets that I find helpful and I've picked up from my experience. Number 1, parenting is hard, like I mentioned before, so just notice it and validate that. It is hard, but it's doable. Number 2, kids are hard, but it's important to remember that kids do the best that they can. So, very often we get so frustrated with kids, they shouldn't be doing this kid is so hard, what's wrong? The fact of the matter is, kids do the very best that they can, the best that they know how, and it can be important to remind yourself that, because the fact of the matter is, the kid might have a deficit in their skill level, they might not know what to do, but they really, really are doing the best they can. So that can be a really helpful sort of mantra to have. Number 3, kids actually want and crave their parents' approval. And these last couple really, I think I gleaned it from sort of like nurtured heart approach and more positive, parenting approaches, which I think is really, really good stuff. And it's important to know, because the kids are not going to say that. They're not going to say, hey, I really want your approval, but they really, really do. Even if it comes across not like that. So it's important to remember it's really important to them, your approval, and so on and so forth. So that's a really important parenting concept. Just a few other pointers, and then I'll move on to the questions. So number 1 is, kids, like anybody else, they really like, compliments and the positive and so on and so forth. So I think that's important to keep in mind as far as just pay attention to your interactions with your kids. Are they positive? Or is there a lot of negative? There are a lot of negative comments, always no's and this and that. No's are fine, but, try to do more yeses than no's. So, if possible, try for the interactions to be positive. Try to say, some compliments, some specific praise. Try to get in lots of yeses as well. A lot of times, even if you are going to say no, how you phrase it is important. So, can I do so-and-so? No, right? Whoa, that's hard to hear, right? We don't like being, barked at, right? So we can validate the request, and instead of saying the word no, we could say, yeah, I totally hear that you want to do that. How about let's do it, a little bit later? Or, I totally hear you want to do that, but it's not going to work out right now. Let's try for tomorrow. Or would you prefer to do it after supper, or would you prefer to do it you give the kid a choice? Sometimes can be, super helpful. But try to get a lot of the ratio of a lot more yeses than no's, positive versus negative. Okay? Spend time with your kids. That's something which is an investment, and build up that relationship. Spend time with them and relish the time with them. So that is important. Also have clear expectations of them. A lot of times as parents, we focus on when it doesn't go right. We focus on the negative, when they don't listen. So, have expectations and communicate it to them. Do they know what's expected of them? We might assume that they do, but very often they don't. They're kids, A lot of kids do have to hear it. They're very black and white. They might have processing issues. So if you have certain rules, or if you want them to act a certain way, how about tell them, right? So just use that communication and have, realistic expectations of them. Tell them what you want them to do, what you expect them to do, ideally in a collaborative way. Have them repeat it to make sure they understand it, and then it's way more likely that they're actually going to listen. Okay? So clear expectations and communicate it to them, and also make sure they're reasonable and age appropriate. Okay. So all of that is great stuff. It's more positive. What if it doesn't go according to plan, which definitely happens? Even with all of that, and you're calm and you're confident, and, that's a big deal. And it makes it way more likely that things are going to go well, and you're trying to roll with it, even if not. But sometimes kids don't listen. So now what, right? No consequences, not, ignore. So what to do? So, of course, we can't say every possible situation. But in general, just to discuss for literally a minute about consequences. So consequences can be important, and, it's not the first thing I work with parents, consequences, because, ultimately there's so many other things to do first before jumping to punishments. How's the relationship? Are we calm? There's so many other things we can do. But ultimately, sure, of course there could be consequences. It could be anything from expressing, hey, I wish you wouldn't have done that. I'm disappointed that you hit your brother, I know you can do better. That could be a consequence. It could be timeout. It could be loss of privilege. There's plenty of consequences. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of hitting and stuff like that, so hopefully that's not taking place, or at least not frequently. But it's okay to have a consequence, and sometimes it's important to have the buck stops here type of thing. So totally fine. But if you do have consequences, just try to make sure a couple of things. Number one, that it's teaching something. An ideal consequence is that it's teaching the kid, they're learning a lesson from it. Right? Number two is it should never be from anger. Right? If it's from anger, which a lot of times in the heat of the moment it will be, which is not great. But ideally, it's, even if you're more calm, even if you come back to them later on, that's totally fine. But it shouldn't be from anger. So screaming or yelling, usually not our best moments. So try to say it when you're calm. And also try to make sure it's age appropriate as far as what you're doing, and try to make sure that it's a lesson if possible, that they're actually learning something from it. That's the idea of a natural consequence, so that way they learn by themselves. You might have to spell it out for them, but that's just a little bit about consequences. More than that, more detail, that probably would have to wait for another live, and so on and so forth. Okay? So those are just a couple of pointers that are just on the sort of the tip of my mind and tongue. I do want to address a question that someone sent in, and then we'll leave it from there. So someone asked me a question of basically, what do you do? How do you handle if your kids don't turn out the way that you want, right? So that's a tough one, right? That's a loaded question. It might be, beyond the scope of this a little bit, but sure that could happen. Sometimes parents have expectations of their kids, or they think they're going to turn out a certain way, or they had a certain dream of that they're going to be a certain way, and often it's not the case. So again, refer to a lot of other stuff that we said. Number one, notice it, right? That would be the first step. Be mindful of it. Like, hey, I thought my kid would be so-and-so and they're not. So just notice it. And it might be fine. It could be they're amazing the way they are. It could be that we have unfair expectations or comparisons. It could be, we're living through them and, we couldn't do a certain thing, so we're hoping our kids are going to do it better. So you just really want to be attuned to, to all of that. And, of course, you want what's best for the kid. But if it's deeper than that, like if you're mourning the way your kid didn't turn out and so on and so forth, or it's an unmet need and so on and so forth, and it's really bringing up stuff in you, definitely that is, deeper. That might even be something which is better for individual therapy. So I will leave it at that. If there's no other questions, so I'm going to stop it there. Please feel free to send me other questions of any of these topics. I know it's a lot. Just to summarize, so we discussed the importance of a parent being mindful, of being calm, and being confident, which is so important. It's important for you, and it's important to model that for your kids. We also discussed some basic parenting tenets, which I think are huge, and then also what to do if it all breaks down as far as consequences versus no consequences. So thanks so much for joining. I hope helpful. And until next time, take care and have a great night. Bye.